Ninth webinar, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. Our first topic is the kleshas, which are the 5 forms of wrong cognition. And reminder of what they are. They're ignorance, identification with I amness, attraction, aversion, and clinging to life. So these are 5 forms of wrong cognition. These kleshas, verse 10, these kleshas in their subtle form are overcome by the process of involution within the individual. My comment, a tendency to a worldly activity when it only exists as a samskara can be overcome through the process of involution, which takes place in the practice of samapatti. Meaning it's just in the subconscious, and the actual practice of deep meditation changes the form of the subconscious and can therefore handle the kleshas when they're in their subtle form. Verse 11, as mental activities, they are overcome through meditation. Comment. However, when that tendency to a worldly activity is present in our thoughts, then it needs to be overcome through insights generated in meditation. So that's a grosser form. It's a thought, and we have to get rid of it by other thoughts. So now we're going to compare that to Gurudeva's teachings. Hatha Yoga is a science of perfecting the physical body through the use of certain postures or asanas. In a deeper sense, it is a system of handling the physical body so that you are able to gain a conscious, actinic control of the odic forces of your subconscious mind. So we're back to the samskaras, back to the subconscious mind. When the body is tuned up to a rhythmic pitch, you can single out the seeds of basic odic desires and destroy them. So that's a form of klesha, a basic odic desire. And we can get rid of it through Hatha Yoga. Gurudeva continues. The seed of desire is a false concept in relation to corresponding objects. The conscious mind throws into its subconscious a series of erroneous thoughts based upon a false concept. This creates a deep-rooted desire or complex. Single out the seed of desire by disregarding all of the corresponding erroneous thoughts. Then destroy that seed through understanding its relation in itself and to all other corresponding thoughts. The deep-rooted desire complex will then vanish. So what's an example? Example comes from me. Medicine Avenue is in the business of planting seeds of desire that are false concept. They get paid for it. An example, you see this picture of someone driving along in a Mercedes-Benz and they look so successful and happy. You see it a few times, you put that into your mind. That's the seed of desire. What's the false concept? That if you own a Mercedes-Benz, you're going to be successful and happy. It's automatic. It's guaranteed. It's right in this picture. Someone really gets impressed by that because they want to be successful and happy. And so every 2 years, they buy a new Mercedes-Benz. This is the result in their life. They're trying to be successful and be happy, but somehow they never end up being as successful and happy as they thought they would. They just end up buying new Mercedes-Benz. Gurudev is telling us, well, how do you sort that out? By understanding. It's an internal process. You just have to understand where that seed of desire came from. You have to realize that, oh, you read those ads. That put that into your mind. That's why you want it. And the whole thing's erroneous knowledge. It's not correct. It's a false concept. We have a number of those that are in our mind. A little background noise there in the office, Swami. We have a number of those that are in our mind. We have certain ambitions get into our mind. We see other people who are successful lawyers or successful this or that, and therefore we think that if we do that profession, we'll automatically be successful, just like that. We put these seeds of desire into our mind, particularly when we're younger. We put them in the mind because they don't have a clear path in life yet. We're more open to random impressions. So we can turn that into a practice. This is our logo for practice. Single out the seed of desire by disregarding all other corresponding erroneous thoughts. Then destroy that seed through understanding its relation in itself and to all other corresponding thoughts. The deep-rooted desire complex will then vanish. So we need to identify it in isolation and then see other thoughts that are related to it. And in that way, Gurudev is saying we can rid the mind of these erroneous concepts. Verse 12. The kleshas are the root source of the stored karma. And that karma may be experienced in the present visible birth or in an unseen future birth. Comment. The kleshas are the causes of our actions that relate to worldly pursuits. All such actions create a karma. So that's how the kleshas are the root source of the karma. They motivate us to act, and the action causes a karma. Verse 13. So long as this root source exists, there also is fruition from it of birth status, lifespan, and life experiences. Three things. Verse 14. These are pleasant or unpleasant as the fruit of meritorious and non-meritorious actions, respectively. So that's just a traditional explanation of the law of karma. Meritorious actions cause a pleasant reaction in the future, and the karmic reaction caused by non-meritorious actions are unpleasant experiences in the future. Standard teaching. Verse 15. Men of discrimination see suffering in all experience, whether from the anguish of impermanence, from the suffering coming from samskars, or from the gunas causing conflicting activities. So an ordinary person focuses on the initial enjoyment that comes from experiences. A wise man, however, looks at it from the opposite point of view, which is that all experiences eventually lead to sorrow. So he's more detached. Verse 16. That which is to be overcome is sorrow that is yet to come. And of course, comment, this is accomplished by acting free from the influences of the kleshas. So relating that to Gurudev's teachings. Somewhere the idea was born that man should live in states of happiness and joy all of the time. But in the first place, happiness and joy depend upon unhappiness and sorrow, even to be recognized or appreciated. If man would only know that whatever emotion transpires within him foreshadows its opposite. Suffering is a greater intensity, a higher vibration than happiness. You do not learn much from your happiness. You learn from the states of suffering, which awaken the higher consciousness of your soul. But suffering has no value for its own sake. When the mind recognizes it is suffering over something or other, it is time to practice meditation, to see into the causes, to expand your consciousness a little bit more so that you will grasp the workings of life and its karmic laws. Then you will attain to a greater intensity than either joy or suffering has to offer. you will view the wheel of life of cause and effect objectively, and you will not so quickly identify yourself with the lower emotions or the objects of your own mind's creation. So Gurudev is saying that eventually this pattern of joy and sorrow and suffering, we overcome it by turning within, by being within. In the superconscious mind, we get out of this emotional state. Then we get the standard breakdown on karma from Gurudeva. Karma is threefold: sanchita, parabdha, and kriyamana. Sanchita karma means accumulated actions. It is the sum of all karmas of this life and our past lives. Parabdha karma means actions begun, set in motion. It is that portion of sanchita karma that is bearing fruit and shaping the events and conditions of the current life, including the nature of our bodies, personal tendencies, and associations. Kriyamana karma means actions being made. It is the karma we create and add to sanchita in this life by our thoughts, words, and actions, or in the inner worlds between lives. While some kriyamana karmas bear fruit in the current life, others are stored for future births. Each of these three types can be divided into two categories: arabdha, begun, undertaken, karma that is sprouting, and anarabdha, not commenced, dormant, or seed karma. In a famed analogy, karma is compared to rice in its various stages. Sanchita karma, the residue of one's total accumulated actions, is likened to rice that has been harvested and stored in a granary. From the stored rice, a small portion has been removed, husked, and readied for cooking and eating. This is parabdha karma, past actions that are shaping the events of the present. Meanwhile, new rice, mainly from the most recent harvest of parabdha karma, is being planted that will yield a future crop and be added to the store of rice. This is kriyamana karma, the consequences of current actions. So now we're tying Gurudeva and Patanjali together. Prarabdha karma determines the time of birth, which dictates one's astrology, which in turn delineates the individual life pattern by influencing the release of these karmas. Three factors are fundamental: the nature of one's birth, the length of life, and the nature of experiential patterns. So that's exactly what Patanjali said. Those three things are coming from our karma. Dormant sanchita karma, while not directly being acted upon, is a weighty and compelling force of potential energy, be it benign or gross, good or bad, slothful or inspirational. It is this dormant karma that explains why two people born at the same moment and who thus have the same astrology differ in their talents and actions. It is this held back force of sanchita karma that the yogi seeks to burn out with his kundalini flame, to disempower it with the karmic reservoir of anandamaya kosha, the soul body. Astrologers who understand karma well emphasize that one can influence his or her dormant sanchita karma. Further, one does have power over karmas being made, kriyamana. The karma set in motion, prarabdha, are binding. They form the gridwork of life and must be lived through. Facing them positively is the key to their resolution. Fighting them through resentment and the release of other negative emotions only creates more unseemly sanchita karma for the future. The law is we must accept and bear our karma cheerfully. So Gurudev is making an important point here. He's saying where we have the most control over karma, of course, is kriyamana. Our current actions are making a future for us. Second to that, the sanchita karma, that what is stored is easier to change than the prarabdha, because it hasn't created a pattern that we're facing yet. It's just a potential. So various religious practices are helpful in changing the sanchita karma. Then the prarabdha is set in motion, And in Gurudeva's teachings, the best we can do there is mitigate it or lessen the negativity if it's a negative karma. But it's going to happen. We just make it happen in a more gentle form. So this is Gurudeva on good and bad karma. In the highest sense, there is no good or bad karma. All experience offers opportunities for spiritual growth. Selfless acts yield positive, uplifting conditions. Selfish acts yield conditions of negativity and confusion. And we have Gurudeva's Bhashya. Karma itself is neither good nor bad, but a neutral principle that governs energy and motion of thought, word, and deed. All experience helps us to grow. Dramatic pause there. All experience helps us to grow. That's important to realize. If we attract an experience, we can learn from it. If we learn from it the first time it happens, then we're growing rapidly. If it takes us a few repetitions, then it takes a while. Good loving actions bring to us lovingness through others. Mean selfish acts bring back to us pain and suffering. Kindness produces sweet fruits called punya. Unkindness yields spoiled fruits called papa. As we mature life after life, we go through much pain and joy. Actions that are in tune with Dharma help us along the path, while adharmic actions impede our progress. The divine law is whatever karma we are experiencing in our life is just what we need at the moment, and nothing can happen but that we have the strength to meet it. Even harsh karma, when faced in wisdom, can be the greatest catalyst for spiritual unfoldment. Performing daily sadhana, keeping good company, pilgrimaging to holy places, seeing to others' needs, these evoke the higher energies, direct the mind to useful thoughts, and avoid the creation of troublesome new karmas. So, do we have any questions on kleshas and karma before we move on? You can see there's a lot of similarity between Gurudeva's teachings on karma and Patanjali's. Okay, no questions. Changing to awareness now. Verse 17. The identity of awareness, the experiencer with what is experienced, is the cause of what is to be overcome. Gurudeva talks about that directly. Many people become attached to their personality and suffer when it changes. One cannot, however, be attached to his individuality. In identifying the difference between personality and individuality, we can say that man's individuality is the actinic superconscious mind, which is constant, permanent, ever unfolding and secure, and deep within at a more intense rate of vibration than his odic conscious and subconscious mind, which make up the ever-changing personality. It is conceivable that man can have many different personalities, but he can only have one constantly unfolding individuality. And so it is the ego or personality mass we must identify as being the unreal and impermanent, and the actinic individuality as being the permanent, secure, ever unfolding and refined actinic phase of the mind. So this is a practice that can be done. This would do an internal concentration on the words personality and individuality. Try to locate your individuality by identifying your several masks or personalities that you have created in this life, and write your findings on why you can get attached to personality but cannot get attached to individuality. So that's a simple practice. Perhaps you remember Gurudeva in the trilogy said, I see myself as an unchanging individuality. from the very time I was born in this life. I haven't changed at all. So if he hasn't changed at all from the time he was born to the time he wrote that, it means he's looking at himself as individuality, as the pure awareness, and not at all as the personalities, which change, of course, drastically as we grow up. So that's a practice. Back to Patanjali, verse 18. What is experienced as the character of brightness, activity, and inertia? It is embodied in the elements and the agents. Its purpose is to provide both experience and liberation. So, commenting on the last idea first, note the dual nature of the world, experience and liberation. Each Purusha needs a certain amount of experience in the world before it is ready to transcend the world to achieving liberation. Well, this is an important point that matches Gurudeva's teachings. Normally, when we think about moksha, liberation, if you ask someone, well, what's required for moksha? Well, you have to realize the self, you have to realize God. That's the only point you get. And then the second one, if they think about it, is, well, we have to resolve all karma. That one is fairly obvious in a secondary way. But the third one is generally left out, and that's Gurudeva's statement, we must fulfill all dharma, which is another way of saying we need a certain amount of experience. We're here to have experience, and that much experience is necessary to move us forward spiritually. We won't even be interested in spiritual matters until we have significant experience of non-spiritual matters. Then we start to get more interested in them. The second point is what is experienced as the character of brightness, activity, and inertia. That's a way of translating the three gunas, three qualities of nature. Brightness is sattva, activity is rajas, and inertia is tamas. So he's saying embodied in the elements and the agents is referring to what is commonly called the tattvas. So we'll just scan this real quickly. There are two categories of elements and also two categories of agents found in the tattvas. So the 5 subtle elements, you can see them there. 5 gross elements we're more familiar with as a concept. Then we get the agents, the 5 agents of perception. Indriya is agent. So jnana plus indriya is jnanendriya, the 5 agents of perception. 5 agents of action we have. Again, that's karma plus indriya, karmendriya, the 5 agents of action. So Patanjali's system is similar to Saiva Siddhanta Tattvas, but slightly different. It aligns with Sankhya philosophy. Then he goes through the levels of the gunas. We don't have to spend much time again on this, it's there. Alinga is the first formation of matter. I like to think of it as it's a pile of clay. And then out of this pile of clay becomes specific objects made of clay. So it's when objects are undifferentiated. Then they start to differentiate, they become unparticularized, and they become particularized. So we won't spend time on that, but that's his system of tattvas there. So according to the cosmology of yoga, the universe as we know it has evolved in a series of distinct stages commencing with the undifferentiated world ground, prakriti or pradana. The evolutionary process is also known as sarga or prasarga, both meaning creation. Contrast to this, pratiprasava is a gradual involution of the yogin's personal cosmos, which ends in the flowing back of the primary constituents into the primal cosmic matrix. So the idea is, and I know there won't be any questions on that, Patanjali has this concept of the world where all of these tattvas come out of one another, just like Saiva Siddhanta. And then for the individual, they go back in, one individual at a time. So for individuals who go within, other individuals who haven't done that still see the full range of manifestation. But someone who has gone in attainment then steps beyond all that into the pure Purusha. Otherwise, he's caught in one or more levels. So back to awareness. Awareness, which is the sheer power of seeing, although pure, perceives the presented ideas. That means awareness views the contents of the mind, and in doing so, it's unchanged. The existence of the seen is only for the sake of awareness. So that's referring back that the world is here to benefit the awareness of the soul by providing both experience and eventually liberation. That's why the world exists. I said this one already. Although what is seen ceases to exist for him whose purpose has been accomplished, it is nevertheless not ceased to exist altogether, as for others it remains the common experience. The identity of the seer with the seen is the reason that the essential form of the power of the owner is perceived to be that of the owned. So this is saying the same thing, that it's just using the word power, that the power of the soul, the power of Purusha, is taken to be the power of the external personality. But the external personality has no inherent power, it's just utilizing the power that comes from the soul. Next one is self-evident. This identity is caused by ignorance. Then verse 25. With the disappearance of that ignorance, the identity also disappears. This is total cessation, the aloneness, kaivalya, the power of awareness. So this is the first time to give a description, the first verse to give a description to what happens to awareness when it no longer identifies with the seen, which is the power of awareness is alone. And of course, kaivalya is the name of the goal in the Patanjali's yoga system. We want to achieve kaivalya. By detaching awareness from that which it is aware of, it becomes alone. Which is the same idea as Gurudeva and Shum, of course. Verse 26. The means of attaining cessation is the unceasing vision of discernment. So discernment means the difference between the seer and the seen. We can remember that we're not the outer personality, but rather the individuality, then that gets us into this detachment. Verse 27. For one with this unceasing vision of discernment, there arises in the last stage wisdom that is sevenfold. So Patanjali doesn't define the sevenfold, so the commentators do it. I didn't bother to list them all, just the last one, which is from the commentator Vyasa. In the seventh state, the insight reveals Purusha abiding in itself, pure and alone. So that reminds us of Gurudeva's definition of Kai, pure awareness, aware only of itself. So the way that the path is described in Shum by Gurudeva and the way that Patanjali describes it is the same. We're trying to detach awareness from that which it is aware of, so it's aware only of itself. And interesting, they both use the word pure. Pure awareness, aware only of itself. Verse 28, when the limbs of yoga are practiced, impurities dwindle and radiant knowledge manifests, leading up to the vision of discernment. This begins the section on the limbs of yoga. Practice causes three events to happen. First, impurities dwindle. Second, radiant knowledge manifests. Third, the ability to discriminate between the seer and the seen manifests. So this is pointing out there's some impurities in us that we need to get rid of in order for this process to go into its second stage there of radiant knowledge. And that's the subconscious or the samskaras. We need to change them, or in Gurudeva's terminology, we need to reprogram the subconscious mind or purify the subconscious mind. And Patanjali is saying the limbs of yoga help accomplish that. Then he goes through the traditional listing. The 8 limbs of yoga are yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. Same as our limbs. Gurudeva's comment in the Master Course Trilogy. This is in the introductory section of each of the 3 books, so you can see that it's very important. Put it in all 3 books. The Master Course Trilogy is a detailed summary and explanation of Ashtanga Yoga according to the traditions of our lineage, the Adinada Sampradayas Kailasa Parampara. Ashtanga Yoga, also called Raja Yoga, has 8 successive steps, each one dependent upon the one that precedes it. Then he goes through the same list. Dancing with Shiva, the first book of the trilogy, lays out the philosophical, Vedic, agamic beliefs, attitudes, and expectations of the Saivite Hindu religion, which are so necessary to understand, adopt, and unfold in order to make true progress in the areas discussed in the other 2 books. For example, Dancing with Shiva, I'm always impressed when I read the book, and it reminds me that the first verse is not about Shiva dancing, which is what you would think from the title. It's about who am I? And it emphasizes you are a divine being who came from God and are returning to God, and this is the path, so forth. Well, one of the greatest obstacles that a lot of people face is a negative self-concept. They don't even think of themselves as a positive person, let alone a divine being. So Dancing with Shiva helps change that concept over time, that we start to identify not with mistakes in the past or not what other people said about us, but with our inner being. So we're a divine being. That means the inside of us is perfect, not the outside. And I always say jokingly that if anyone was perfect, they wouldn't have been born in the first place. No need. So everyone has at least one imperfection, probably a lot more that we're working on improving. And Dancing with Shiva helps get that perspective in the mind that we're a divine being, we make mistakes, and we're improving, and that's okay. Living with Shiva, the second book of the trilogy, concerns itself with Saivite lifestyle, culture, family life, character building, and the overcoming of uncomplimentary habits that disturb others, as well as oneself, focusing on yama and niyama, in a lesser way asana, pranayama. For the entire system of Ashtanga Yoga to work, a firm philosophical cultural foundation is found in Dancing with Shiva and Living with Shiva must be subconsciously accepted by the devotee as his own way of looking at and living life, relating to it experience, solving problems, approaching worship, and so forth. Relating it to experience, solving problems, approaching worship, and so forth. The yama and niyama material, which is the first 2 stages in Ashtanga Yoga, of course, I've never seen anywhere else that it's explained in such great detail. That's the value of that material. It explains each one at length for all ages of life. Makes it relevant for young people and old people as well. There's material there that's invaluable. And that's one of the reasons we reprinted it as a separate book called Yoga's Forgotten Foundation, just to make it more available and talk to people about how this is what's really needed. And of course, when yoga is taught today, those two stages are usually left out, yama and niyama. And therefore, as I think it was BKS Iyengar said, yoga taught without yama and niyama is mere acrobatics. That's how he described it. Merging with Shiva, the third book of the trilogy, encompasses steps 5, 6, and 7, leading to 8, all of which is personally experiential once we learn to dance with Shiva and live with Shiva. This means having a good philosophical understanding, solid commitment, as well as good character, and living the religion. Upon such a foundation, the yogic and metaphysical experiences described in merging with Shiva come naturally and are sustainable. That's one reason we did the character book, even though the yamas and niyamas, well, character is more the yamas, even though the yamas are very well explained in living with Shiva, it's hard to grab onto certain points as to how to practice them. So the character building workbook develops the yamas as well as other concepts in a way that it gives you something very specific to do. This is what you can do to improve on this quality. And of course, we're just trying to improve. We're not trying for perfection. We want to be better now than we were a few years ago. Then Patanjali is defining the yamas. For those of you who don't recall, the yamas are not static. In Hindu literature, Patanjali's time, there were 5 yamas and 5 niyamas. And then by the time of the later writers, such as called the Yoga Upanishads, you're up to 10. So Gurudeva, I'm sure, felt the more the better, and adopted the 10 that are in the Yoga Upanishads rather than Patanjali's 5. They're almost the same, but there's a couple of differences. Yamas are valid in all spheres, irrespective of birth status, place, time, or circumstance, and constitute the great vow. Well, that's self-explanatory. They apply to everyone, everywhere, all the time. Niyamas, again, he just has 5. Purity, contentment, austerity, self-study, and devotion to Ishvara. And he gets practical. For the repelling of unwholesome deliberation, its opposite should be cultivated. So the example I always think of is if you're thinking of saying something unpleasant to someone, say something pleasant. Thinking of taking something from someone, give them something instead. So it reverses the energy of it. Verse 34, unwholesome deliberations such as harming someone and so forth, whether done, caused to be done, or approved, whether arising from greed, anger, or infatuation, whether modest, medium, or extreme, find their unending fruition in ignorance and suffering. This is why one must cultivate their opposites. Well, this is a very practical verse. Usually when karma is thought about, it is in the context of an individual performing an action, and that action causing a reaction in the future. So we generally think, if I do something, it's an action, and therefore there'll be a reaction. The law of karma will come into play. But this verse is pointing out the subtleties that even if you don't perform the act yourself, but have caused others to do it, or approved others to do it, that also creates a reaction in your future. So if you talk someone into doing something inappropriate, you get a karma as well as they do. Everyone involved gets the karma. We get a practice for the repelling of unwholesome deliberation. Its opposite should be cultivated. One example. An associate says something to you that you think is overly critical of what you did. You don't respond at the time, but regularly think about how you can criticize them the next time you meet. So the opposite is you change tactics and find a way you can instead compliment them next time you meet. So you're repelling the unwholesome thought by thinking about it and then eventually doing the opposite. So there's lots of ways we can incorporate that principle in our life. Oh, this is me. I see what I said here. We have explored together, this is some conclusion to Yoga's Forgotten Foundation. We have explored together Gurudeva's elucidation of the 20 ancient Vedic tools for self-transformation, practiced through the millennia by tens of millions of seekers. Their challenges back then are no different than ours in modern times. It is always challenging to undertake the work of changing our habits, changing our thoughts, changing our attitudes, reactions, and modes of action. Challenging yet enormously rewarding when our efforts bear fruit. Success in fulfilling the yamas and niyamas provides the stability in our life that sustained success in meditation requires. Without this stability, the ups and downs of life are paramount, and significant advancement in our spiritual life does not manifest. A tall building needs a solid foundation to sustain an earthquake without toppling. So too, higher states of consciousness need the positive habits of the yamas and niyamas to be sustained through the challenges that inevitably come to us in life. Okay, then we have the quote that I used before. Practice of asanas without the backing of yama and niyama is mere acrobatics. Then there's a second half I didn't say. Yama and niyama control the yogi's passions and emotions and keep him in harmony with his fellow man. So that's the key. We need to stay in harmony. Harmony with our spouse, harmony with our children, harmony with other family members. Sometimes people say, well, how can I be harmonious with someone that's always antagonistic toward me? It's easy. You let them be antagonistic and you ignore it. You radiate something nice toward them. There's no reason you have to entangle with someone. A little bit more on the 8 limbs. Verse 46, asana posture should be steady and comfortable. So this is important. I read this to the monks class, and one of them realized that when he was meditating, he was not relaxing. He was holding tension in an effort to really be sitting up straight. He was doing so in a tense manner. So you don't want to do that. It needs to be comfortable. It needs to be straight but relaxed. So figure out how to do that. Sit up straight, but do so in a way that's relaxed. Next verse develops that idea. 47. This occurs through relaxing effort and samapati upon the infinite. So, ananta samapati, samapati upon the infinite. This is a practice we can do to relax, to have steady and comfortable posture. Feeling you have the qualities of infinite space, that you extend out beyond your physical body into the surrounding environment, and then beyond that, etc. That is the visualization to focus on, while at the same time simply relaxing. So a very specific visualization there, help us. 48, then comes imperturbation by the pairs of opposites. Self-explanatory. We're just sitting there and heat and cold, things like that don't bother us. So we need that to get on to pranayama. 49. When this is achieved, pranayama can be practiced in which between inhalation and exhalation, breathing is suspended. So that just means holding it a while. And we, of course, do that with various counts. The basic one being 1 count. We breathe in for 9 counts, hold 1, breathe out for 9, hold 1. So that's what it's referring to. The basic patterns are exhalation, inhalation, and lull. These, when observed as to time, number, and area of focus, become long and subtle. So that's the same idea as Gurudeva, that breathing naturally slows down, but through the practice of pranayama for a number of minutes. The fourth kind of pranayama is that which transcends regulating inhalation and exhalation. So it doesn't explain it, but the way we look at that is, at a certain point, you don't have to think about your breath. You don't need to regulate it. It will naturally follow the pattern you have set, stay in the rhythm of inhalation and exhalation. You can go somewhere else in your mind and the breath will stay regulated. That's our interpretation. Something to look forward to here, verse 52, thence the covering of the inner light disappears. So the covering disappears, meaning the inner light appears, saying it backwards. And the mind becomes fit for concentration, dharana. 54, pratyahara is when the sense organs withdraw from external objects and imitate, as it were, the nature of the mind. So it's just quiet. 55, from that follows supreme self-control over the sense organs. So that's the goal, is the sense organs are under control. In a really deep meditation, it's like being asleep but being awake. The senses really aren't functioning. You're not aware of the sounds in the room, etc. You've really turned them off, but you're still wide awake. That would be supreme self-control. So Gurudeva, some thoughts on those. Controlling the breath is the same as controlling awareness. They go hand in hand. During meditation, the breath, the heartbeat, metabolism, it all slows down, just like in sleep. You know, deep meditation and deep sleep are extremely similar. Sounds like I knew that was coming up. Therefore, the practice of pranayama and regulation of the breath, the pranas, the currents of the body, should really be mastered first. In the very same way, the dancer doesn't just start out dancing. He starts out exercising first. He may exercise strenuously for a year before he begins to really dance. Imagine that, 1 whole year before you start to dance. The pianist doesn't sit down at the piano and start with a concert. He starts with the scales and with the chords. He starts by lingering his fingers, by perfecting his rhythm and posture. Meditation has to be taught like one of the fine arts. It's only the finely refined person who can really learn to meditate. Not everyone who wants to meditate can learn to meditate. Not everyone who wants to learn to dance or play the piano can learn how to really do it. We need this preparation of the physical body so that the physical and emotional bodies behave themselves while you're in a deep state of meditation. Of course, Hatha Yoga is part of that too, that giving the control. Many people, the most common story I hear when someone talks to me about meditation is, I sit to meditate and I can't control my mind, it goes everywhere. A very common statement when someone I don't know that well starts talking to me about meditation. So there's no cure-all for that. You can see all of this is really needed. We need to do our Hatha Yoga. practice yama, niyama, asana, pranayama. That's all needed to be done, and that can take quite a while to get all those basics in place, and most people aren't that interested in meditation to go through all that. But you really need to perfect all that. As Gurudeva says, it's like the dancer just doing beginning exercises for a whole year before he or she does the actual movements. So when we do that, when we properly prepare ourselves with those introductory practices, then the actual quieting of the mind is an easy process. So Gurudeva continues. Breath controls prana. This practice is called pranayama. It is the control of prana, the regulation of prana, or the withdrawal of prana from the external world back to its primal source. That is why pranayama is so important to practice systematically, regularly, day after day, so we get all the prana into a rhythm. In this way, we get a rhythm of the pure life force flowing through the Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna and out through the aura. This is how we feel when we are in these chakras. Dharana, of course, concentration is the binding of the mind to a single object. Jhana is an unbroken flow of thought toward that object. And then when that practice results in the mind being as if empty of its own form and the object of meditation alone shining forth, it is samadhi. So the idea there is, when we choose an object for concentration, we're kind of on again, off again in our thoughts about it, say a flower. Then when those thoughts just keep flowing, it's like you're writing something and it just keeps flowing without a break, versus coming back and forth. When the thoughts start flowing just on that one object, that's the next step. And then eventually the object and you are one thing. You're not having a flow of thoughts anymore. You're just focused on the object and kind of being the object. So that's what this is talking about. That's a type of samadhi. So Gurudeva's description here of contemplation, which is the same as some bodhinatha samadhi, is identification or oneness with the essence of an object. Its highest form is the realization of the primal substratum or pure consciousness, Satchit Ananda. So sometimes we just think of the lower samadhi as Satchit Ananda and the higher samadhi as Parashiva. But Gurudeva is saying, no, the highest form of the lower samadhi is Satchit Ananda. Lesser forms are also experienced. Anytime you become one with the essence of an object, that's a samadhi. Samadhi means there's only one, not two anymore. There's a one. Experiencer and what's being experienced are one thing. Our last slide, it says, personal testimony. Our last slide gives a personal testimony from Gurudeva of his experience of the 8 limbs of yoga. I was taught these steps at a very young age: attention, concentration, meditation, and contemplation, and then into the very deepest samadhi. After I went through that, I came out into contemplation, into meditation, into concentration, and thought, how simple. Where was I, wandering around all this time, not to have been able to perceive and be the obvious? Okay, any questions on the 8 limbs or any questions on the presentation? This is our last slide here. Okay, I have a nice comment here I see from Raja Manik. Thank you, Bodhinatha, for the very clear explanation to distinguish between personality and individuality, to remind us that we are a divine being. Question, during asana, are we to be more involved with thinking about the concepts or feeling them? Feeling, definitely. Asana in our system, there's nothing to think about. It's all a feeling and a visualization. You're feeling energy, and you can add the color visualization on top of that. So feeling and visualization are used and not thinking about it. There's nothing really to think about in asana the way we do it. You're welcome, Ajahn. Any one last question here? We just have 1 or 2 minutes left. Well, very good then. Thank you very much for tuning in. This concludes our 9th webinar. Om Namah Shivaya.